capture loading. Difficult terrain detected. Proceeding with caution. The Emperor protects.
Greetings, Imperial citizens. Back once again with only the vaguest recollection of how I got here. It's your host, Jimmy.
Today we're going to be talking about hills. Classic Windows background, eternal source of inspiration to Kate Bush, and bane of anybody who's ever used a movement tray.
But rolling, goblin green hills often look out of place on urban-style battlefields.
I'm planning on building an entire set of ruined city terrain, much like that shown in the old City Fight Codex.
Bearing that in mind, I set myself a challenge. Can I make 3 different types of hill for an urban setting? So I've settled on the following 3 ideas. A pile of scrap, a building with a collapsed floor, and just to grimdark it up, a pile of corpses.
Starting with the scrap pile, we're going to take this nice big bit of plasticard and score it with a steel rule and a sharp knife to make a base of the correct size. First we'll take this old Lehman Rust tank. I got this already pretty battered in an eBay lot. I don't suggest you actually destroy a vehicle kit for this, but let's face it, it'd be pretty cool if you did. Stick it down with super glue. To make up the majority of the bulk of the scrap, we'll roll some tin foil into balls. Bonus points if you use it from the recycling like I have, although it does seem to have quite a large amount of burger grease still on it. Stick these to the plasticard base with super glue. Fast forward a bit and add a few more greasy balls. Now it's time to dive into the big box of bits.
Several years of working in a factory has allowed me to accumulate a large collection of small, useless plastic bits, to the point that my boss now collects them for me, although he does describe it as my
interesting Warhammer hobby stuff,
which is lovely.
I grabbed a handful of bits at random. I'll start sticking them on wherever they'll fit. Comment on how many times you think I stuck plastic bits to my fingers during this step. And there we are, a mound of bits tall enough to be a hill. To make it look like it was once an enclosure of scrap, I take some of this neat corrugated plasticard to make a little fence with. To stick it all together, we'll use methyl ethyl ketone, which might sound like you'd get arrested for cooking it up in a lab in the woods, but it's actually just a really strong solvent, which is why I put the bottle in this mug, because the last time I knocked a bottle of this over, I melted my keyboard. I cut some fence posts from plastic rod. I used the methyl ethyl ketone to stick them to the fence panels. Make sure you keep the lid on this as much as possible, as it evaporates faster than a woman's interest in me once she realises I make Warhammer videos for YouTube. There we are. It looks a bit more like it was an enclosure at some point. I primed it with black car paint and then gave it a coat of that textured spray paint you get that's supposed to look like stone, which I suppose it might if you'd never seen a stone before. Moving on to the collapsed building, I started by cutting out the base and the walls from more plasticard. I unleashed years of pent-up anger on the top edge of the walls to make them look ruined. Make sure you do the exact opposite of me and always cut away from yourself. I used more of the methyl ethyl ketone to stick the walls in place and braced them with a couple of buttresses made of spare plasticard. That's a funny word. I cut some balsa wood strips to make planks for the door and window. Don't worry about my fingertip turning black, by the way. It's not gangrene, it's that cheapo car paint. I stuck some planks to a spare bit of plasticard to make the door and then superglued it into place. I measured and cut this piece of textured paper to size and glued it to the ground at the front of the building to represent a cobbled pavement. If you are feeling very creative, you might be able to use textured wallpaper here for more interesting patterns, although that might have been banished to the void of tacky decor from whence it came and more difficult to get hold of cheaply these days. Simultaneously both wasting not and wanting not, I reused this bit of plasticard I had been using as a palette to make the collapsed floor that will turn this building into an urban hill proxy. Two side walls were made of more scrap plasticard and glued into place with a naughty sounding chemical. A small landing and stairs were also put together and glued into place. Don't worry about any dodgy angles and wonky bits, we'll just pretend it's a new build. Some balsa wood was superglued in an overlapping fashion to make the stairs. Strips of balsa wood were glued down to the collapsed floor to represent floorboards. I added a short broken wall to the inside of the building to make it look as though this upper floor once held multiple rooms. More greasy balls were added to both the inside and the outside of the building. Now we're going to make a texture paste using no more nails. Some people like to use polyfiller, which I feel can crumble and crack. No More Nails is a bit more pricey, but it sets like a rock. To this we add fine sand, PVA glue and bits of plasticard. Mix it together until it looks like porridge if you're English or oatmeal if you're American. Interestingly, the third largest demographic in the audience is German, so mix it until it looks like Haferflocken. Spread the cursed oatmeal over the building and then wait a day or so for it to dry. You can use this stuff to cover up any mistakes in the build. Next up is the pile of corpses. How big this will be really depends on how long you've been in the hobby for, as it relies on the contents of your bits box. Make a mound with your aluminium foil that kinda looks like it might have been bulldozed into place. Slather it in No More Nails. Make sure you use appropriate PPE as supplied by your employer. I mixed up some green stuff and made some press moulds of some Wargames Atlantic skeleton warriors. This would help bulk out the bodies that this mound is made of. When it's dry, carefully pull the plastic skeleton out. Brush the inside of the mould with a little bit of cooking oil and then push some more green stuff into the mould.
It's time to dive into that giant box of bits.
Start covering the mound in bodies from your bits box. Just go crazy, stick them anywhere. You can fill in the gaps with skulls, weapons and cursed oatmeal if you like. And there we have it, a pile of corpses. It's actually quite heavy. Let's start painting. The junk pile was given a coat of red primer and then sprayed from above with Citadel's lead belcher, which I apparently forgot to film. The building was given a coat of grey car primer from Poundland, which smells like Satan's armpits, but it was cheap. The pile of bodies was given a coat of Citadel's Xandri dust, followed by a zenithal prime of Wraithbone, which smells like Bakewell tart. Don't sniff your spray paints, kids. The base of the junk pile was painted with Citadel's Mechanicus Standard Grey, and then the fence panels were painted with Reaper's Marine Teal. Dirty down rust was then used in patches, but you've got to shake this stuff good. Like, even the Vortex mixer wasn't enough, I had to get a stick in there and mix it. This was then bolstered by rust-coloured enamel washes and pigment powders, which I set with isopropyl alcohol. The building was given a wash of watered down black artist's ink. After that was dry, I gave it a heavy dry brush of Reaper's Misty Grey. The floorboards were given a coat of Wildwood contrast paint. The interior walls were painted with a selection of fetching colours. The building was then dusted with various pigment powders in shades of tan and grey, which were set in place once more with isopropyl alcohol. The bodies on the corpse pile were painted with a variety of contrast paints. And then once they were fully dry, the entire thing was doused with Army Painter's Quick Shade Strong Tone. This is an enamel based product and normally takes an eternity to dry, but we've had a heat wave here in the UK, so it was touch dry after a couple of hours sitting in direct sunlight. It shrinks as it dries, darkening the recesses. After painting the base with Mechanicus Standard Grey, I decided it needed something else to imply that these bodies had been bulldozed into position, so I made a streak of blood on the ground using various paints and inks. I used an old toothbrush to apply this as it leaves a streaky look. And with that, I'm willing to call them done. Let's take a look.
Well, citizens, that was another episode of Splat Hobbies. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you saw today, don't forget to give the channel a subscribe. Maybe consider liking this video, leaving a little comment in the comment section down below. Tell us if you have any ideas of how you would do urban hills. So until next time, may your bristles never fray. See you later.